So it's with great pleasure that I welcome and ask you to join me in welcoming the Honourable David Anderson to the podium.
Thank you very much, Jack, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Your worship, I didn't realize that that meant that people actually worshipped you. That makes you sound like a cardinal of the Catholic Church or something. I would like to say, however, that this is the first mayor that's ever been introduced to me as someone who works on solar power. You can see it's been lined up here that I am to work on water power, and most of you think that all politicians work on wind power. Nevertheless, this is my first solar-powered mayor. It's great to be here in Toronto. I would also like to recognize, if I could, initially, a few people who are here with us. Judy Sgro has been mentioned. I just think it's tremendous that we have someone who's come directly from municipal politics in Toronto to assist David Collinet and myself in the Liberal caucus and in the House of Commons with first-hand knowledge of municipal problems. And I'd like to say that when praise is given out for things like the $125 million, which so many federal ministers are wondering how it got in the hands of the municipalities so neatly, Judy, I'm sure, will be willing to accept a certain amount of well-deserved praise for her efforts to assist us in making sure the municipalities of Canada were indeed recognized for the work that they did. So thank you, Judy, for attending today. It's great to be here, and I know we also have Carolyn Bennett, who's here, coming back, but is not here at the moment. I would also like to mention a few others in the room, because federal policy is, you'll be pleased to know, not always developed in a vacuum in a back room somewhere in Ottawa. And we have had a number of excellent meetings, which Jack has referred to develop policies for air, as well as, of course, in other areas of environmental concern, species at risk, global warming. And there are some people who I'd like to recognize here. Louise Corbett from the Toronto Environmental Alliance, John Wellner from Pollution Pro, Monica Campbell from the Toronto Public Health, and Brian Stokes from the Lung Association, and there are many others here who have helped in developing our policy, have come to Ottawa, met with me there, or met, as Jack indicated a month ago, with me here in Toronto. So this very much is a policy which I believe has a strong input from, I don't like that word, but the strong involvement, the strong presence of people here in Toronto. But this summit is important to all of us, and it's important because it gets all levels of government, plus the environmental organizations, plus business, together so that we can look at what we're all doing and how we can work together constructively to deal with a major problem. That major problem, as Jack has mentioned, I have to confess right now, I have a bias, or I have a special interest in, because I spent my early childhood fighting asthma. I would get to school maybe 2 days a week. In bad weeks, maybe not at all. And in good weeks, sometimes 3 days a week, or even occasionally 4 and 5. But I remember as a small boy, propped up in bed, unable to breathe freely, consciously thinking about breathing. You'd think about each breath you took, and as you got a little older, I guess around 7 or 8, you began to wonder what might happen if, in fact, you failed to achieve the conscious breathing that you were doing. It was an experience which I would not wish on anyone, but of course, as we know, asthma is becoming a more prevalent condition for children, and therefore this particular work is particularly important. Jack mentioned that later in life I went on to take part in Canada's team in the Olympics. I've always thought it was probably a reaction once I got my asthma over with. I was determined to make up for all those many, many years when I could not even play soccer in the goal because, of course, I was unable to run. So, this is an important one for me, and I confess right off the bat, personal bias, personal interest, and I take it for what it's worth. Now, this conference, we were warned, Jack and I were warned by Hazel McCallion, who was very good at warning federal ministers and others in politics. She warned us all at the meeting a few weeks ago not to get together for just another gabfest. She said, quote, "Let's get some work done." So none of us can do it alone. We must work in partnership because atmospheric pollution knows no jurisdictional boundaries, whether domestic or international. And when it comes to health and the environment, Canadians expect us all to act together. And they have a right to expect that, and to expect as a result clean air and clean water, and that there will be adequate monitoring systems, adequate regulations, and that laws and regulations will be effectively enforced. So we are here today in Canada's major urban centre, but let's remember also that this is not just an urban problem. My asthma that I mentioned was in a Victoria many years ago, and it was essentially a small, very small city perched on the edge of some very clean air. Asthma and respiratory problems today extend not just in cities, but everywhere, and air pollution problems are in small Ontario cities just as much as in Toronto. So we all have to address the threats, whether they're greenhouse gases, whether they're persistent organic pollutions, whether it's acid rain, whether it's mercury, smog, and I will be discussing these in short order. I should add, of course, as probably already mentioned earlier today, that there were last year 8 smog alerts in Toronto, and there's already been one so far this year. In addition, not only in Toronto, but also there were 8 in Sarnia, in London, in Hamilton, in Windsor. Even Ottawa, perched on the edge of all that clean northern air, had 3 last year. Selon la statistique de Santé Canada, plus de 5 000 décès prématurés sont reliés chaque année à la pollution atmosphérique. Selon les estimations de l'administration torontoise de santé publique, un 5e, soit 1000 décès prématurés, se produisent ici à Toronto. Les enfants et les personnes âgées sont les plus en danger. So as Minister of the Environment, I have declared that clean air is my #1 priority. You can only have one #1 priority. It is not species at risk. It is not the climate change. It is not contaminated sites. It is clean air. Others may be very important, but that is the primary the priority of Environment Canada and of me. And may I assure you, as David Collinette will as well, that we have the full support of the Prime Minister and our Cabinet colleagues in making this our #1 environmental priority. We wish to reduce the toll of death and illness caused by air pollution from all sources. Now, we have to clean up, of course, across the country. We have to have a strategy, but we have to also recognize that some things can and must be done first. So let me run through some of those things. As Jack mentioned, I was here a month ago in Toronto with various mayors from Southern Ontario and various councillors, and that was when Jack originally proposed this summit, and I congratulate him for the great work in putting it together so quickly. Really, that's excellent. And the challenge is now to say what I've done in the last 31 days since Jack and I met and we discussed the issue. But let me quickly run through it. First of all, we've begun consultations on the best way to reach pollution reduction goals from vehicle and fuels by the 2004 model year. Vehicles and fuels are major components of our smog problem, and we have in place both for sulfur in gasoline and sulfur in diesel. Now we have in place plans. We also have in place plans to bring in the escapees from the passenger car restrictions, namely the SUVs, the light trucks, and the vans, and bring them under passenger vehicle regulation. Second point, Alan Rock and I have declared that particulate matter equal to or less than 10 microns in size to be a toxic substance under the Canada Environmental Protection Act, and we have begun the process of designating management options for various industrial sectors. Once again, there's a 60-day provision there in the Act, which I should quickly mention, but we have started the process by declaring particulate matter of that size to be toxic under CEPA. Third, we announced that the primary focus of funding under the new infrastructure program, not the one Jack talked about, the $125 million, which is this year's program, but the future one that starts some 9 months hence, and which will extend for 5 years, a $2.65 billion program, we've announced that the primary focus of the funding of that program will be for green infrastructure projects, which will help improve water and air quality. I should add in there, just for to round it out, that also solid waste and landfill is part of the triumvirate of issues which the municipalities regard as core infrastructure issues to be addressed. Figures are not absolutely nailed down for infrastructure. We haven't had the discussions with the provinces yet, but my full expectation is that the half of it that's left, after David Collinette has had his slice for transportation, half of it that's left will be for those three topics. That's $1 billion, more than $1 billion, matched of course by $1 billion from the provinces and $1 billion from the municipalities. So a fairly substantial chunk will be for that. Next, 3 weeks ago, we reached an agreement with all provinces and territories on Canada-wide standards on ozone and for fine particulate matter that will speed up the reduction of smog in our cities by 2010 or earlier. In Ontario, that essentially means a 45% reduction between now and 2010 or earlier. Let me stress the or earlier. Ontario has agreed, under certain circumstances, to advance that date even further. Now again, I met with my American counterpart. Here goes the water-powered politician. I met with my United States counterpart, Carol Browner, the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, 2 weeks ago, and we have agreed on the negotiations for an ozone annex with the United States towards the goal, and a realizable goal, of signing such an agreement before the end of this year. Now, on ozone in particular, how does this shape up? First, the Canada-wide agreement on ozone will see Canada meet a target of 65 parts per billion for ozone by 2010 or earlier, and that is 5 years earlier than was expected in previous federal-provincial discussions. And I congratulate Dan Newman and the province of Ontario for advancing that date. Canada-wide standards on ozone are particularly important here in Ontario, and of course, particularly important here in Toronto. Here is the smog problem, which is the cause of so many hospitalizations and so much concern, of which you heard earlier today. Now, what does that require? It requires strong commitments from the province of Ontario, the federal government, as well. And let me just for a moment say that I'm very pleased that Ontario is taking the required steps to develop its anti-smog action plan. Again, I congratulate that provincial government and Dan Newman in particular. The federal government is taking concrete steps as its part to help achieve those reductions. I mentioned the Vehicle and Fuels Program. That is expected to get us about half of that 45% reduction. In fact, I believe it's marginally above half of the target that we have set for 2010 or earlier, the target of the Canada-wide standards for ozone. The notice of intent that we've issued for vehicles and fuels will meet or exceed United States standards starting in the year 2004 model year, i.e. 2003, and will reduce smog precursors of nitrogen oxide levels of 77% for passenger vehicles and 95% for the SUVs and light trucks. This program will include new measures to deal with diesel engines and diesel fuels to match the American actions in the U.S. Details will be announced on that as we work them out with the industry, and details will be announced prior to the end of this year. Again, the target is 15 for diesel, 15 parts, rather than the current level of 500 parts. Now, this meeting has discussed cooperation and joint action, and I agree that working with the provinces, with the municipalities is key. I would like to comment, however, on some of the measures that are necessary to reach the other half of that 45% reduction. We're looking to the Government of Ontario to implement additional measures and regulations that are needed. Let me indicate some of the areas. First, the province will need to take aggressive action on the electric power sector and the hundreds of large and medium-sized combustion boilers that are operated by scores of different industrial and commercial sectors, such as petroleum refineries, chemical plants, iron and steel mills, auto manufacturing plants, and of course many others. And while gasoline and gasoline-fueled vehicles and small gas engines play a big part in the release of the VOCs, solvents are a significant contributor. Solvents are found in paints, in coatings, in glues, adhesives, and of course in industrial and household cleaners. So we will need a substantial reduction in the use of solvents by industrial sectors. And among these operations, such as commercial printing, auto repair, refinishing, industrial degreasing, and scores of others, that is where we will have to find those changes. And that is why and where the province can move seriously to implement measures such as recovery techniques to capture these volatile organic compounds and reduce emissions. That's perhaps a Freudian slip there. So that is where I look to progress to be made to reach the other half of that 45% target for ozone and to reach it by 2010 or earlier. Well, the or earlier brings up the United States, because Ontario has agreed that if the United States does more, they will do more. And therefore, the progress on the ozone annex negotiations are particularly important, both because of the air quality problems that come from the United States, somewhere between 30 and 80%, depending on time of year, time of day. But also, in addition, of course, if that target improves, if they improve their performance, Ontario has promised to match them. In this area, of course, I have to negotiate with the Americans, and if I can pun slightly, to go and negotiate with Americans, you need clean hands, or at least you need to clean up on air so that you can, in fact, actually negotiate. If you go down there and say, gee, well, we'll just match you, or, well, we'll see what you're going to do and then we'll do something. You're not negotiating, you're taking what they give you. So I believe there has to be actions here in Ontario to reduce emissions from Ontario Power Generation's fossil fuel plants. And if Canada is to receive a strong commitment from the United States in the new annex to the Air Quality Agreement, obviously heavy industries must also reduce their emissions. Now, may I raise on something else that was discussed, something else discussed in May. In addition to what I've described today, the federal government is also prepared to work in its own areas of responsibility to reduce smog precursors here in Ontario. Health Minister Alan Rock and I have already declared, as I mentioned, particulate matter less than or equal to 10 microns to be toxic. This sets in place a process which will reduce emissions Canada-wide. What we intend to do as well is to go the next step by declaring other precursors that cause particulate matter to be toxic as well. These precursors are sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, the so-called NOx, volatile organic compounds, the VOCs, and ammonia. These will be treated the same way as we are treating particulate matter less than 10. And the notice of intent for this declaration of toxicity under the CEPA, under the Canada Environmental Protection Act, will be published in the Canada Gazette shortly, and that will provide the formal notice and kick off the system that will declare these precursors to smog toxic under CEPA. This will mean that the federal government can then develop action plans to deal with the reduction of these substances. Now, before I turn the podium over to my colleague, David Collinette, may I, in all sincerity, thank the Mayor, thank Jack and other city councillors here in Toronto for their vision and their willingness to work for clean air. We have here, I think, really the leaders, municipal leaders, on this problem. Things that you've done, such as the action plan on smog alert days, the GO Transit switch to low sulfur fuel, co-op cabs converting the fleet to natural gas, and Mayor Lastman and Jack Layton getting a smog reduction plan for city departments and city employees. This really is putting the money where the mouth is, putting action to match rhetoric. I congratulate you. And in that spirit, I'd like to mention two new commitments that the Government of Canada is making today that will, in fact, assist in what you're doing here, specifically in Toronto. First, Environment Canada, Health Canada, and Public Works, the three federal departments here in the Ontario region, will be implementing a similar corporate smog and a particularly important area, retrofitting of buildings for greater energy and water efficiency. Now, we're starting with those three departments. We'll work out through the other departments, and we will be, I hope, putting in place something that Jack will find fits, meshes nicely with what is being done by the City of Toronto. Now, in addition, we intend to expand, the second item, we intend to expand our information systems on air pollution and its risk across Canada. As Torontonians know, and the rest of us sometimes don't, information is power. The smog alert system that is currently in place allows you to make decisions about how much time to spend outdoors, when to drive, and whether you should in fact mow your lawn. And it's crucial to those people who have asthma or other respiratory illnesses, and for protecting your own children and the elderly from unnecessary risks. So today I intend to announce a new initiative to improve national air quality prediction capabilities and to provide more air quality information to the public. The first step will be investing an extra $1 million to, first, increase the information base of our existing air quality advisory program, which is here in Ontario. Second, to create a daily air quality index immediately in the other areas of the country most affected by smog, which are the 3 maritime provinces, Quebec, and the lower mainland area of British Columbia. We'll be expanding and improving the network across Canada as more research is completed. And I might add that particulate matter, which is with us year-round, will be added to the list of pollutants that are tracked. Now, obviously, we're not starting from scratch here. Ontario has an established program which I believe we will be able to improve, a program which makes major use, of course, of the good work done by the Meteorological Service of Canada. In St. John's, New Brunswick, the Daily Air Quality Index is well established, and the program has been expanded across that province. I'll be making an announcement tomorrow in Prince Edward Island on smog forecasting. We intend to work closely with the municipalities, with environmental organizations, health organizations, and business to develop the most effective national system that we can, which will have strong public information elements. Now, the elements that I've described today, along with other activities, demonstrate that there is progress taking place, and that clean air and smog reduction in particular are main pillars of our environmental policy, in fact, main policy of the department. But I would like to close on the theme partnership. We'll all do much more, and we'll do it better, and we'll do it quicker if we work together. That means the provinces, the federal government, the municipalities, non-governmental organizations, and business. If we're all committed to the goal, we will succeed, and succeed far better than otherwise could. But it is time, in my view, time for those who are particularly at risk to make sure that the choices are there to reduce smog days, to cut air pollution related to illness and death, and to ensure, as a birthright of Canadians, clean air. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Minister Anderson, and to you and your staff for bringing us these welcome announcements on very short notice with a tight timeline, and your initial encouragement to proceed with the summit was fundamental. It wouldn't be happening had that not happened.